The rain was pouring down hard that Tuesday evening when 17-year-old Lily walked up the long driveway to the biggest house she had ever seen. Her old sneakers were soaked through, and her jacket wasn't doing much to keep her dry. But she kept walking, one step after another, toward the massive front door that looked like it belonged in a castle. Inside that house lived Richard Thornfield, one of the richest men in the country. He owned a huge company that made medicines, and everyone knew his name. What most people didn't know was that behind all that money and success, Richard was dealing with something that no amount of wealth could fix. His 3 children were broken, and he didn't know how to help them anymore. Lily had been watching the Thornfield family for months, not in a creepy way, but in the way someone studies something they desperately want to understand. She had read every newspaper article about them, watched every interview, and even volunteered at events where she might see them from a distance. She knew things about this family that even their closest friends didn't know. 2 years ago, Richard's wife had died in a car accident. Since then, his oldest son, Jake, who was 16, had panic attacks so bad that he couldn't even go to school most days. His daughter, Emma, who was 14, had stopped eating properly and was so thin that people whispered when they saw her. And his youngest boy, Tommy, who was 12, hadn't spoken a single word since his mother's funeral. Richard had tried everything. He hired the best doctors money could buy. He sent his children to fancy treatment centers that cost more than most people make in a year. He even used experimental treatments from his own company. Nothing worked. His children were getting worse, not better, and he was running out of hope. Lily knew all of this because she had lived through something similar herself, not the rich family part, but the broken part. She had been in foster care for 3 years, bouncing from one home to another. Before that, she had lived in St. Catherine's Home for Children since she was 7 years old. Her own parents had died when she was little, and she understood what it felt like when your whole world falls apart. But here's what made Lily different from all those expensive doctors and therapists. She had figured out how to put herself back together. Not completely, maybe nobody ever does that, but enough to function, enough to hope, enough to believe that broken things could be fixed, even if they never looked exactly the same as before. The idea came to her one night when she was lying in her current foster home, staring at the ceiling, and listening to her foster parents argue downstairs about money. She had been thinking about the Thornfield children and how similar their pain was to her own, even though they lived in completely different worlds. Rich or poor, she realized, grief feels the same. Loss cuts just as deep whether you're sleeping, in a mansion or on a couch in a crowded foster home. That's when she decided to do something that everyone would think was crazy. She was going to offer to help them. The next morning, Lily started planning. She couldn't just show up at their door. That would never work. She needed to meet Richard Thornfield in person, somewhere public where he couldn't just dismiss her, immediately. She found out he would be attending a charity dinner at the Grand Hotel downtown. The tickets cost $500 each, money she definitely didn't have. But Lily was resourceful. She had learned to be. She called the hotel and asked if they needed any volunteers for the event. After some convincing, they agreed to let her help serve drinks in exchange for being allowed to stay for the speeches. It wasn't perfect, but it would get her in the room. The night of the charity dinner, Lily put on the only nice dress she owned, a black one she had gotten from a church donation pile. It was a little too big and a little too long, but it was clean and it would have to do. She braided her long dark hair and practiced what she was going to say in the mirror of the hotel bathroom. The ballroom was incredible. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and every table had flowers that probably cost more than Lily's foster family spent on groceries in a month. Rich people in expensive clothes talked and laughed, while a string quartet played music in the corner. Lily felt completely out of place, but she had a job to do. She spotted Richard Thornfield immediately. He was taller than she had expected, with gray hair and tired eyes. He was talking to a group of people near the front of the room, smiling and shaking hands, but Lily could see something the others couldn't. He looked exhausted. Not sleepy tired, but soul-deep weary, like someone carrying a weight that was too heavy but refusing to put it down. Lily waited for the right moment. After the speeches were over and people were starting to leave, she approached him. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears, but she forced herself to walk up to him. "Mr. Thornfield," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "My name is Lily, and I have something important to tell you." He turned to look at her, probably expecting her to ask for an autograph or a job. Instead, she looked him straight in the eye and said the words she had been practicing for weeks. "Take me in, and I will heal your children." Richard stared at her for a long moment, his expression changing from polite interest to confusion to something that might have been amusement. Then he laughed. Not a mean laugh, but the kind of laugh someone makes when they hear something so unexpected that they don't know how else to respond. "I'm sorry." "What did you say?" he asked, still smiling. "Your children are hurting," Lily continued, not backing down. "Jake has panic attacks because he feels responsible for protecting everyone now that your wife is gone. Emma isn't eating because controlling food is the only control she has left in a world that feels chaotic. And Tommy isn't talking because he's afraid that if he says the wrong thing, he might lose someone else he loves." The smile disappeared from Richard's face. "How do you know about my children?" "Because I've been where they are," Lily said simply. "I know what it's like to lose everything and not know how to keep going. I know what it's like when adults try to fix you, but they don't understand that you're not broken in the way they think you are." Richard was quiet now, really looking at her for the first time. "You're just a child yourself," he said, but his voice was gentler than before. "I'm 17, Lily replied, "old enough to know that sometimes the people who can help the most are the ones who have survived the same storm." "And what exactly are you proposing?" Richard asked, though Lily could tell he thought she was probably crazy. "Give me 1 month," she said. "Let me live in your house and spend time with your children. If I can't help them, if I can't show you some real progress, then you never have to see me again. But if I can help them, if I can show them how to carry their pain without letting it destroy them, then you help me build something bigger." "What kind of something bigger?" Richard asked, curiosity replacing skepticism in his voice. "A place where kids like me can help kids like them," Lily explained. "A center where people who have survived trauma can teach others how to survive it too. Not by forgetting it or pretending it didn't happen, but by learning how to transform it into strength." Richard was quiet for a long time, studying this strange girl who had appeared out of nowhere with her impossible offer. Everything logical told him to say no. She was a teenager with no credentials, no training, no experience except her own difficult life. His children needed real help from real professionals, but then he thought about all those real professionals who had tried and failed. He thought about Jake hiding in his room, Emma pushing food around her plate, Tommy's empty silence. He thought about how desperate he had become and how nothing else had worked. 1 month, he said finally, surprising himself. "But you'll stay. In the guest house, not the main house. And if you do anything that makes things worse, if you upset them or cause any problems at all, you're gone immediately." Lily nodded, trying to keep the relief and excitement off her face. "Thank you, Mr. Thornfield. You won't regret this." "I already regret it," Richard muttered, but there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. It was small and fragile, but it was there. It was hope. The guest house where Lily would be staying was bigger than any place she had ever lived. It had its own kitchen, living room, and bedroom, plus a bathroom with a bathtub that was so deep she could probably swim in it. But as nice as it was, Lily could feel the tension from the main house like a thick cloud hanging over the entire property. Her first morning there, she woke up early and made herself a simple breakfast. Through the kitchen window, she could see the main house and wondered what the Thornfield children were doing right now. Were they eating breakfast with their father? Were they hiding in their rooms? She had spent so much time planning how to get here that she hadn't really thought about what would happen once she arrived. Around 9 o'clock, there was a knock on her door. She opened it to find a woman in her 50s wearing a crisp blue uniform. This was Mrs. Rodriguez, the house manager, and she did not look happy. "Mr. Thornfield wants to see you in his study," Mrs. Rodriguez said, her voice polite but cold. "And just so you know, I think this whole thing is a terrible idea. Those children have been through enough without some stranger coming in and making things worse." Lily nodded, understanding the woman's concern. "I don't want to make things worse either," she said quietly. "I just want to help." Mrs. Rodriguez softened slightly, but her expression remained skeptical. "We'll see about that." The study in the main house was exactly what Lily expected from a rich businessman. Dark wooden bookshelves filled with leather-bound books, a massive desk, and family photos everywhere. But it was the photos that caught Lily's attention. In every single one, the family looked genuinely happy. Richard, with his arms around a beautiful woman who must have been his wife. The 3 children at various ages smiling and laughing. It was like looking at a completely different family from the broken one she was here to help. "Those were taken before," Richard said, noticing where she was looking. "Before the accident. Before everything fell apart." He looked older in the daylight, more tired than he had at the charity dinner. His expensive suit couldn't hide the fact that he was a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. "I want to set some ground rules," he continued, sitting behind his desk while Lily remained standing. "My children don't know why you're here. As far as they know, you're just staying in the guest house temporarily. I don't want you approaching them directly or trying to force any kind of interaction. If they want to talk to you, fine. If they don't, you leave them alone." "That's actually perfect," Lily said, surprising him. "The worst thing you can do with hurt people is try to force them to trust you. Trust has to be earned, especially when someone's been let down before." Richard studied her face, looking for signs that she was just saying what he wanted to hear. But Lily's expression was sincere. She really meant it. "All right then," he said finally. "Mrs. Rodriguez will show you around the property. The children usually eat breakfast around 10 if you want to." Observe. The house was enormous, with rooms that seemed to go on forever. But as they walked through it, Lily noticed something important. Despite all the space, there were clear signs of where each child spent their time. Jake's room was at the end of a hallway, as far from everyone else as possible. There were scratches on the doorframe from where he had probably slammed it during panic attacks. Maya's room was perfectly clean, too clean, like a museum display rather than a place where a teenager actually lived. And Tommy's room still had toys that looked like they hadn't been touched in months, gathering dust on shelves that were probably arranged by his mother. But the most telling thing was the kitchen. It was a beautiful, modern space that should have been the heart of the home. Instead, it felt empty and cold. Mrs. Rodriguez explained that the children rarely ate together anymore. Jake usually grabbed something quick and ate in his room. Maya would come down, push food around her plate for a few minutes, then claim she wasn't hungry. Tommy would eat whatever Mrs. Rodriguez put in front of him, but in complete silence. "It wasn't always like this," Mrs. Rodriguez said sadly. "Before Mrs. Thornfield died, this kitchen was full of laughter. She used to cook with the children, and they would all sit at that big table and talk about their days. Now it's like a ghost town." Lily spent the next few days just watching and learning. She didn't try to talk to the children, but she made sure to be visible. She would sit on the guest house porch with a book or walk around the garden or work on a puzzle at the kitchen table when she thought one of them might see her. The first breakthrough came with Tommy. On her 4th day there, Lily was sitting under a big oak tree in the backyard, drawing in a sketchbook she had brought with her. She wasn't a great artist, but drawing had always helped her think. She was sketching the tree when she noticed a small figure watching her. From behind the garden shed, Tommy stood there for almost an hour just watching her draw. When Lily was finished, she left the sketchbook on the ground near the tree and went back to the guest house. The next morning, it was gone, but in its place was a small drawing of a bird, done in colored pencils. It wasn't signed, but Lily knew who had left it. She put Tommy's drawing on her refrigerator and left another sketchbook under the tree. This became their routine. Every day, Lily would leave materials, and Tommy would create something. He never stayed to talk, but Lily could feel him watching her sometimes, and she made sure to always seem peaceful and safe when he was around. Jake was harder to reach. He barely left his room, and when he did, he moved quickly through the house, like he was trying to avoid being seen. But Lily had experience with panic attacks from her time in foster care. She knew the signs: the rapid breathing, the sweaty palms, the way someone's eyes dart around looking for escape routes. One night, around 2 in the morning, Lily heard footsteps in the main house kitchen. She had been having trouble sleeping, which wasn't unusual for her in new places, so she decided to make herself some tea. She found Jake there, sitting at the kitchen island with his head in his hands, breathing hard. "Hey," Lily said softly, not wanting to startle him. "Are you okay?" Jake looked up, his face flushed and his eyes wide. "I can't breathe right," he said, his voice shaky. "I feel like I'm dying, but I'm not dying, and that makes it worse because I know I'm being stupid." "You're not being stupid," Lily said, moving slowly to the other side of the kitchen. "Panic attacks feel like you're dying. That's what makes them so scary." "You know about panic attacks?" Jake asked, still breathing hard, but looking at her with interest. "I used to get them all the time," Lily admitted, "especially at night. Want to try something that helped me?" Jake nodded, desperate for anything that might help. Lily taught him a breathing technique she had learned from a kind nurse at one of her foster placements. 4 counts in, hold for 4, 4 counts out. But she added her own twist to it. "While you're breathing, I want you to name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste," she said. "It tricks your brain into focusing on right now instead of all the scary what-ifs." They practiced together for 20 minutes until Jake's breathing returned to normal. He looked embarrassed but grateful. "How did you know to do that?" he asked. "When you've been scared a lot, you learn how to get unscared," Lily said simply. "It doesn't make the fear go away forever, but it makes it manageable." Jake nodded, understanding more than she expected him to. Will you be here tomorrow night, in case it happens again?" "I'll be here as long as your dad lets me stay," Lily promised. Maya was the most challenging of the 3. She was angry in a way that the boys weren't, and she saw Lily as a threat. One afternoon, Maya cornered Lily in the garden. "I know what you're doing," Maya said, her arms crossed and her chin raised defiantly. "You're trying to replace our mom, but you can't, and you're just making everything worse by pretending you care." Lily looked at this fierce, heartbroken girl and saw so much of her younger self. The anger, the fear of being abandoned again, the desperate need to push people away before they could leave on their own. "You're right," Lily said, which wasn't what Maya expected to hear. "I can't replace your mom, and I wouldn't want to even if I could. And you're also right that I'm a stranger who doesn't really know you yet. But you're wrong about one thing." "What's that?" Maya asked, still suspicious but curious despite herself. "I'm not pretending to care," Lily said. "I do care, and that's not going to change whether you're nice to me or mean to me. I've been where you are, and I know that caring about people feels dangerous when you've lost someone important." Maya's tough expression faltered for just a moment, and Lily saw the scared little girl underneath all that anger. "I don't want to talk about it," Maya said, but her voice was quieter now. "That's okay," Lily replied. "When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be here." By the end of the second week, something in the house had shifted. It wasn't fixed, not even close, but it was different. There was less silence, less avoidance. Tommy had started leaving his drawings in places where his family would see them. Jake wasn't having panic attacks every night, and Maya, while still cautious, had stopped actively avoiding Lily. Richard noticed the changes too, though he tried not to get his hopes up. But when he saw Tommy smile at one of his own drawings, when Jake came down for breakfast 2 days in a row, when Maya ate an entire sandwich without being reminded, he began to think that maybe, just maybe, this strange girl might actually know what she was talking about. By the third week, the Thornfield house felt different. It wasn't completely transformed, but there was something lighter in the air. Lily had been careful not to push too hard or move too fast, but now she felt like the children were ready for the next step. She had gained their trust, or at least some of it, and now she wanted to show them something that had saved her own life many times over. It started with the kitchen. Lily had noticed that while Mrs. Rodriguez cooked for the family, none of the children knew how to make even basic meals for themselves. This wasn't unusual for wealthy kids, but Lily thought it was part of the problem. When you don't know how to take care of your basic needs, you feel helpless in other areas of your life, too. "Hey, Tommy," Lily said one morning when she found him, in the kitchen staring at the cereal boxes. "Want to learn how to make pancakes from scratch?" Tommy looked at her with interest, but didn't say anything. He still wasn't talking, but his expressions had become much more animated over the past few weeks. He nodded enthusiastically. Lily had learned to cook out of necessity during her time in foster care. Some of her placements didn't care much about feeding the kids regularly, so she had figured out how to make filling, nutritious meals with whatever ingredients were available. But cooking had become more than just survival for her. It was a way to take care of herself when no one else would. "Cooking is like magic," she told Tommy as they mixed flour and eggs together. "You take all these separate ingredients that don't look like much on their own, and you turn them into something completely different. Something that makes people feel good." Tommy smiled as he stirred the batter, getting flour on his nose and not caring. When Jake wandered into the kitchen, drawn by the smell, Lily handed him a whisk without saying anything. Soon he was helping too, and for a few minutes he looked relaxed in a way Lily had never seen before. "This is actually kind of fun," Jake admitted, flipping a pancake with more enthusiasm than skill. "I never thought about cooking as something I could do. Most people think cooking is complicated, but it's really just following directions and paying attention," Lily said. "Kind of like managing anxiety, actually. You learn the steps that work, and then you practice them until they become natural." Maya appeared in the doorway, just as they were sitting down to eat their slightly lumpy but delicious pancakes. She stood there for a moment, clearly wanting to join, but not sure if she should. "There's enough batter for more," Lily said casually, not making a big deal out of it. "If you want some." Maya hesitated, then came into the kitchen. "I don't really eat breakfast," she said, but she sat down at the table anyway. "That's okay," Lily replied, putting a small pancake on a plate in front of her. "You don't have to eat it, but Tommy worked really hard on the batter, so maybe you could just try a bite to see how it tastes?" It was a smart approach. Instead of making it about Maya's eating issues, Lily made it about supporting her little brother. Maya took a tiny bite, then another, then another. Before she knew it, she had eaten the whole pancake. "These are actually really good," she said, sounding surprised. "Can you teach me how to make them?" From that day forward, cooking became their thing. Every morning, Lily would teach them something new: scrambled eggs with cheese, French toast with cinnamon. Simple sandwiches that were somehow more satisfying than the fancy meals Mrs. Rodriguez usually prepared. But more importantly, they started talking while they cooked. Not about heavy topics or their feelings, but about normal things. Jake told them about a book he was reading. Maya mentioned a TV show she liked. Tommy didn't speak yet, but he listened to everything and occasionally laughed at their jokes. The real breakthrough came when Lily introduced them to what she called survival skills. These were things she had learned during her hardest times, practical abilities that had helped her feel capable and confident even when everything else was falling apart. When I was in my worst foster placement, Lily told them one afternoon as they sat in the garden, I felt completely powerless. The foster parents didn't care about me. I had no money, no friends, nowhere to go. But then I realized that even though I couldn't control my situation, I could control some things about how I responded to it. She taught Jake how to fix a leaky faucet, change a tire, and balance a checkbook. These might seem like random skills for a wealthy teenager, but Lily knew they were about more than just practicality. They were about proving to yourself that you could handle whatever life threw at you. Every time you learned to do something new, something useful, you're telling your brain that you're capable, she explained. And when your brain believes you're capable, it's harder for anxiety to convince you that you're helpless. Jake absorbed these lessons like he was dying of thirst, and she was offering him water. For someone whose anxiety made him feel out of control most of the time, learning concrete skills that he could rely on was incredibly powerful. With Maya, Lily took a different approach. She noticed that Maya's issues with food were really about control and perfectionism. Maya felt like everything in her life was chaotic, so she tried to control the one thing she felt she could: what she ate. You know what I learned about control? Lily asked Maya one day as they worked together in the garden, planting vegetables. The more you try to control things that are actually uncontrollable, the more out of control you feel. But when you focus on controlling the things you actually can control, it's like finding your balance again. They planted tomatoes, lettuce, herbs, and carrots. Maya was fascinated by the process of growing their own food. Here was something she could control that was actually good for her instead of destructive. When you grow your own food, you know exactly where it came from and what went into it, Lily explained. It's not about restriction or punishment. It's about taking care of yourself in the most basic, important way possible. As the days passed, Maya started eating more. Not because anyone was forcing her, but because she was genuinely excited about the meals they made with ingredients from their garden. She began to see food as fuel for her body instead of an enemy to be defeated. Tommy's transformation was the most dramatic, even though he still wasn't speaking. Lily had set up a workshop in one corner of the garage, filled with art supplies, building materials, and tools appropriate for a 12-year-old. She called it their creation station. Sometimes when words don't come easily, you have to find other ways to express what's inside you, she told him. Your drawings are beautiful, but I think you have even more to say. Together, they built birdhouses for the local animal shelter. Tommy threw himself into the work with an intensity that surprised everyone. He would spend hours measuring, cutting, sanding, and painting, creating houses that were not just functional, but genuinely artistic. The work seemed to unlock something in Tommy. He started humming while he built, then singing softly to himself. His whole body language changed. Instead of the hunched, careful way he had moved before, he began to stand straighter, move with purpose. One afternoon, while they were working on a particularly complex birdhouse design, Tommy looked up at Lily and said his first words in 2 years. "Thank you for showing me how to build things." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she kept her voice steady. "Thank you for letting me learn alongside you." The changes weren't just happening with the children. Richard had been watching everything, and he was amazed by what he saw. His kids were eating meals together again, laughing, arguing like normal siblings. Jake's panic attacks had become rare instead of nightly occurrences. Maya was gaining healthy weight and seemed genuinely happy for the first time since her mother's death. And Tommy was not only speaking again, but had become the most talkative of the three. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in how they related to their grief. Instead of being crushed by it or trying to avoid it, They had learned to carry it differently. They still missed their mother terribly, but now they could talk about her, share memories, even laugh about funny things she used to do. Lily taught us that missing Mom doesn't mean we're broken, Maya explained to her father one evening. It means we loved her, and love doesn't disappear just because someone dies. The local news caught wind of the story when Tommy gave a presentation at the animal shelter about the birdhouses they had donated. Standing in front of a room full of adults, this boy who hadn't spoken for 2 years talked confidently about woodworking, animal care, and the importance of giving back to the community. Building things teaches you that broken doesn't mean worthless, Tommy said, his voice clear and strong. Sometimes when something breaks, you can fix it so it's even better than before. And sometimes you can use the broken pieces to build something completely new. The reporter who covered the story was so moved that she asked to interview the whole family. Richard was hesitant at first, but Lily encouraged him to share their story. People need to know that healing is possible, she said, and that sometimes the best help comes from the most unexpected places. As the month drew to a close, Richard realized that Lily had done something he had thought was impossible. She had given him his children back. Not the same children they had been before their mother died, because that was impossible. But she had helped them become new versions of themselves, stronger and more resilient than before. The question now was what would happen next. Lily had kept her end of the bargain, and now it was time for Richard to keep his. The month was almost over, and everyone in the Thornfield house could feel it. The atmosphere was tense in a completely different way than when Lily had first arrived. Back then, it had been the tension of broken people trying to avoid more pain. Now it was the tension of people who had found hope and were terrified of losing it again. Lily was packing her few belongings in the guest house when she heard a soft knock on the door. She opened it to find all 3 children standing there, looking more serious than she had seen them in weeks. "We need to talk," Maya said, speaking for all of them. "About what happens next." They sat in the living room of the guest house, the same room where Lily had spent so many evenings reading and planning how to help them. But now everything felt different. These weren't the same broken children she had met a month ago. They looked healthier, stronger, more alive. "Dad thinks we don't know what's happening," Jake said. "But we're not stupid. We know this was some kind of trial period, and we know it's ending soon." "We don't want you to leave," Tommy added, his voice firm despite the tears in his eyes. "You're part of our family now." Lily felt her own eyes filling up, but she tried to stay calm. She had known this moment would come, and she had been dreading it, not because she didn't care about them, but because she cared too much. "I don't want to leave either," she admitted. "These past 4 weeks have been the happiest I've been in a very long time. You guys feel like the siblings I never had." "Then stay," Maya said simply. "Dad has enough money to take care of all of us. You could go to the same private school as us, and we could keep learning things together, and everything could stay the same." Lily looked at these 3 amazing kids who had become so important to her, and she felt her heart breaking a little. How could she explain to them that staying wasn't really an option, not the way they wanted? "Do you remember what I told you about building things?" she asked Tommy. He nodded. "You said sometimes you have to break something apart to build something better." "That's right," Lily said. "And sometimes, even when you love something exactly the way it is, you have to be willing to change it so it can grow into something even more amazing." Before any of them could ask what she meant, Richard appeared in the doorway. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping well, and Lily could tell he had been wrestling with some big decisions. "I was hoping to find you all here," he said. "We need to have a family meeting." They moved to the main house, gathering in the same living room where Lily had first seen those happy family photos. But now there were new photos mixed in with the old ones. Pictures of the kids cooking together, building birdhouses, working in the garden, pictures where they were smiling again, but in a different way than before, more mature, more aware of how precious happiness could be. Richard sat down across from them, looking nervous in a way that reminded Lily of Jake before he learned to manage his anxiety. "Lily," he began, "when you first approached me with your offer, I thought you were probably crazy. A 17-year-old girl with no training, no credentials, claiming she could help my children when teams of professionals had failed. It seemed impossible." Lily braced herself for what she was sure would come next. A polite thank you, maybe some money, and then a goodbye. "But you did it," Richard continued, his voice growing stronger. "You did something I had started to believe was impossible. You gave me my children back. Not the same children they were before, because that was never going to happen. You helped them become something new, something stronger." He paused, looking at each of his children with so much love in his eyes that Lily had to look away. "The question now is what happens next. And I have a proposition for you, Lily. Not the same kind of proposition you made to me, but something bigger." Lily looked up, confused. This wasn't going the way she had expected. "I want to adopt you," Richard said simply. "I want you to become part of this family officially, permanently. I want to be your father, and I want these three to be your siblings forever." The room went completely silent. Lily stared at Richard, unable to process what she had just heard. After 17 years of being unwanted, of bouncing from place to place, of never belonging anywhere, someone was asking her to be part of their family. "But that's not all," Richard continued before she could respond. "I also want to help you build that treatment center you talked about. Not just fund it, but build it together. I want to create something that has never existed before." "What do you mean?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I want to revolutionize how we think about healing," Richard explained. "You proved something incredible here. You showed that sometimes the people who can help the most are the ones who have walked through the darkness themselves. What if we could scale that? What if we could create a place where survivors help other survivors?" Lily's mind was racing. She had dreamed of something like this, but she had never imagined it could be this big. "Think about it," Richard continued, getting excited now. "A treatment center where peer counselors work alongside traditional therapists, where kids who have overcome anxiety help other kids with panic attacks, where young people who have survived eating disorders mentor others who are struggling, where children who have lost parents guide other grieving children. It would be like what happened here," Jake said, understanding immediately, "but for hundreds of people instead of just 3. "Exactly," Richard nodded. "Lily, you have something that no amount of education or training can teach. You have lived experience, and you know how to use that experience to help others heal. But more than that, you know how to teach other people to do the same thing." Lily was quiet for a long time, thinking about everything Richard had said. It was more than she had ever dared to hope for: a family, a future, and a chance to help other kids like herself. "There's one thing I need to add," she said finally. "If we do this, if we build this center together, I want to make sure we do it right. We need to hire real therapists and medical professionals too. What I do, what other survivors can do, it's powerful, but it's not enough by itself." "Of course," Richard agreed. "We would create a model that combines the best of both worlds, professional expertise and lived experience working together. And we need to make sure it's not just for rich families," Lily added. "The kids who need this most are often the ones who can't afford it." "We'll find a way to make it work for everyone," Richard promised. "This isn't about making money, Lily. This is about changing lives." Maya, who had been quiet through most of this conversation, suddenly spoke up. "What would we call it?" Lily smiled. "I've been thinking about that for months. The Phoenix Center. Because a phoenix is a bird that rises from ashes, and that's what we're all doing, in our own way." 6 months later, the Phoenix Center opened its doors for the first time. It was housed in a beautiful building on 20 acres of land about an hour outside the city. There were traditional therapy rooms alongside art studios, workshops, gardens, and even a kitchen where clients could learn to cook healthy meals for themselves. The staff was unlike anything that had ever been tried before. Licensed therapists worked alongside peer counselors who were all survivors of various traumas. Former foster kids, young people who had overcome addiction, teenagers who had battled depression and anxiety, adults who had lost parents at a young age. All of them had been carefully selected and trained, but their real qualification was that they had lived through pain and come out stronger on the other side. Jake became one of the first peer counselors, specializing in helping teenagers with anxiety disorders. He had a gift for recognizing the signs of panic attacks and knew exactly what to say to help someone through them. "I tell them the same thing Lily told me," he would explain. "You're not broken, you're not crazy, and this feeling will pass." Maya started a program called Nourish, which combined traditional eating disorder therapy with cooking classes and garden therapy. She helped young people develop a healthy relationship with food by teaching them to grow, prepare, and share meals with others. "Food isn't the enemy," she would tell her groups. "It's medicine for your body and fuel for your dreams." Tommy, despite being the youngest, became one of the center's most popular counselors. He worked with children who had experienced trauma and weren't ready to talk about it yet. Using art therapy and building projects, he helped them find ways to express their feelings without words. "Sometimes you have to build something with your hands before you can rebuild your heart," he would tell the parents who were amazed by their children's progress. Richard left his pharmaceutical company to focus on the Phoenix Center full-time. He used his business experience to create a sustainable model that could be replicated in other cities. Within 2 years, there were Phoenix Centers in 5 states, with plans for many more. But the real success stories were the individual lives that were changed. Kids who had been written off by other programs were thriving. Families that had been torn apart by trauma were healing together. Young people who had felt hopeless were discovering that they had the power to help others, which gave their own pain meaning and purpose. Lily, who was now officially Lily Thornfield, split her time between running the original Phoenix Center and traveling to help establish new ones. She had enrolled in college to study psychology, not because she needed credentials to do what she was doing, but because she wanted to understand the science behind why her methods worked so well. On the 2nd anniversary of the Phoenix Center's opening, they held a celebration that filled the entire campus. Hundreds of former clients came back to share their stories, along with their families and the staff members who had helped them heal. During the ceremony, Tommy, now 14 and more confident than ever, gave a speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "2 years ago, my family was broken," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the crowd. "We thought we were too damaged to ever be happy again. But then Lily showed us something incredible. She showed us that being broken isn't the end of your story. It's just the beginning of becoming something new, something stronger." He paused, looking out at all the faces in the audience, many of them young people who had found their own strength through the Phoenix Center programs. "The phoenix is a bird that burns up completely and then rises from its own ashes," Tommy continued. "That's what we've all done here. We've taken our pain, our trauma, our darkest moments, and we've used them to build something beautiful. We've turned our scars into wisdom, our struggles into strength, and our healing into hope for others." As Tommy spoke, Lily looked around at the family she had found and the community they had built together. The scared, angry, silent children she had first met were now confident young people who were using their experiences to help others heal. Richard had transformed from a desperate father into a visionary leader who was changing how the world thought about trauma and recovery. And she, the unwanted orphan girl who had once had nothing but her own survival skills and stubborn hope, was now Dr. Lily Thornfield, founder and director of a movement that was spreading across the country. The Phoenix Center had proven that healing flows both ways, that sometimes the people who need saving the most are the ones best equipped to do the saving, and that the most powerful medicine often comes not from a prescription bottle or a therapy manual, but from one wounded soul reaching out to help another find their way back to the light.